Dr. Bill Adams here, and this is a special edition of No Spin Live. We're here with Dr. Anand Deva from Sydney, Australia, and we're going to discuss something. Anand, you and I have been talking about a lot of this stuff for many, many years, but an article just came out from the Daily Mail, and probably one of the more irresponsible articles that I've seen in a long time. What did you think about this, Anand?
These are sorts of articles are simply trying to grab attention, aren't they? We've been around, as you say, a long time, 20 years studying breast implants. And there's nothing that grabs attention in headlines like a scandal around breast implants. And I think, newspapers want to sell copies. So something like this, sensationalizing some of the findings, perhaps amplifying, preying on people's fear and emotion, is one way that often these stories reach out through the media.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously, this is regarding the subject of breast implant ALCL. That's a topic that we've both been involved with a long time. We've all done, I think, a lot of good scientific research, and I think what's probably important is that there are certain probably messages that are reality and that patients would want to know about. And I thought it'd be great, you being certainly a leading scientist in the field, maybe just kind of review some of those points that we feel like is important.
Sure, actually by Senator Moynihan from New York, and he said everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not to their own facts. And I think what'll get us through, working out what's best for patients. I think we've got to think about patients here. There is a lot of fear. If you were, let's get into the head of a patient who's had an implant. They pick up this article, they read it. The first response would be, "Oh my God, I could get cancer." And so we need to think about them as we go through this. And the only way we're going to get through this is that we articulate very clearly what the facts are. I think we've arrived at a point now, we've got some facts associated with ALCL that we can speak with quite confidently.
This article says that hundreds of women have a time bomb inside their body. Would you agree that that's just irresponsible reporting?
Well, as I say, that their role of the newspapers is to grab attention and to sell newspapers. So, if you look at it from that point of view, of course, people are going to read that and, oh my God, and talk about it. And that's kind of how newspapers work. They grab people's attention. But yes, of course, the consequence of words like that are that it preys into the minds of patients. I am for the patient, as are you, Bill. We need to think about the patient's, experience through all this. Words matter. These will prey directly into patients. And I think in some ways it's unnecessary, particularly when we are starting to have a very clear idea of the science and the evidence that drives this disease. I'm confident that, even in the next 12 months, we'll be sitting here talking and we'll have a lot more facts associated with the disease worked out. And that's terrific. To have something that was kind of on the edge of our consciousness, obviously then become more clear in terms of, okay, this is a real problem, and then have a lot of hard work research that actually shows us the truth and the facts. So as I said, people can have lots of opinions, but there are only one set of facts, and these are the facts that now are what we should be talking about, because the facts tell us two things. One, that with greater understanding of how this disease comes about, the tools now to potentially prevent it. Secondly, that the clear pattern of this disease is not one that inevitably progresses, that we have a great opportunity to catch it early, and really that should be the most important message. It pains me today that there are patients, even in Australia, you think, where have these people been who are still not aware that a blowing up of one implant further down the track, it could be ALCL, they haven't even heard of it. So we need to increase awareness of this disease. We need to ensure that any woman presenting with, late swelling of the implant is immediately worked up.
Yeah, and so just briefly, you talked about the 4 factors that we know contribute to the formation of the disease. Those being textured implant, bacteria, some sort of genetic predisposition, and time. But again, can you draw the lines together so that people can understand why texture? Why is texture seen to date? There's not been a smooth case. How does the bacteria fit into that? Maybe just briefly can explain how that pathogenesis works.
Sure. So we've talked about this. This is a unifying theory. This was published last year in a paper. It's still a theory, but as I say, the facts are starting to emerge very, very strongly. So what we think goes on is that certainly a textured implant is placed into a patient. Now, we know that if at the time of surgery, or perhaps less commonly after surgery, bacteria get attached onto the surface of a textured implant, it's a bit like a playground for them. I mean, they are able to find the nooks and crannies in the various textured implants and grow to a much greater number. That's been shown both in patients, in our laboratory, through many, many studies, and that's consistent. And it makes sense. The greater the cell, its capacity to support bacterial growth. Now, as these bacteria grow, they shed off all sorts of nasty bits and pieces. We call them antigens. And those antigens then interact with the patient's immune system. And of course, over time, if the patient carries some mutations within these immune cells, or perhaps the cells are prone towards mutation, there's the genetics that they will flip from a benign type lymphocyte, which is the immune cell, into a lymphoma. And that process takes time. So you've got those 4 factors. Now, of course, we can control 2 of them. We can't control time. We can't necessarily control, and we might screen for genetics in future. But the 2 things we can fight at the moment are infection. So we can reduce the numbers of bacteria on these implants as they go in. And that's something that you and I have been passionate about and trying to talk about for many years, because the advantage is not just ALCL, but to reduce capsular contracture. But the second thing is the choice of implant. So with texture, the paradigm of saying, oh, texture smooth is actually now no longer relevant. We've got a paper coming out in PRS where we've done some really sophisticated testing on the actual implant surfaces. And what's clear is that when you actually objectively measure the surface area and the surface roughness, so how rough these surfaces are, there are 4 grades, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So as the numbers get smaller, the implants become less rough. And in fact, on the grade 1 surfaces, they're essentially a smooth implant. But when you put that grading across ALCL and the risk, the disease, suddenly jumps and up to 4. The highest risk at the moment in Australia is for the 4. In the US, you cannot get a 4. The 4 is not approved for sale to patients, which is probably a good thing. But certainly the 3s, which is the highest surface area, and surface roughness implants in the US, they carry the highest risk in the US. And I think the other thing which I might sort of say is that the US data and the rest of the world data, there seems to be a split. So for many reasons, I think patients are not being tested. We discussed this actually on the panel, and I think you were there, Bill. The US data is skewed towards much worse disease, and that gives you, I think, a false picture of actually the proper presentation. When you go away from the US and you go to the rest of the world, it's about that 80-20, so 80% is actually that early stage disease. And that's also, I think, another reassuring fact that we've got time to capture that disease.
Yeah, interestingly, the survey that we just did through the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery looked at that, and quite interestingly, it came back exactly the same stratification as you just alluded to the rest of the world, where 80% of the cases are this kind of indolent early stage disease, which seems to be the most common presentation. I do think that it's been a great review. Certainly this article, it's somebody trying to get attention that doesn't know a lot about the disease. I think you've been given a really good overview. Patients should feel good that we actually have learned quite a bit of knowledge about breast implant ALCL. We're accumulating more as time goes, but it is something that is, number one, very treatable. Patients do need to be aware that if they have any changes with their breast, they need to go in and see their surgeon, because the patients that have been diagnosed with this in a prompt fashion, at least to date, have all been cured with the relatively simple treatment. So, I think that it's unfortunate that we have media that just wants to gain attention and try to get ratings by sensationalized reporting. We've seen that before. We certainly don't agree with it, but Anand, really appreciate you sharing what the science says, because at the end of the day, This is all about science and data, and that's how we're going to be able to not only make this a very minimal problem for any breast implant patient, but give patients their best outcomes.
So our focus should be, rather than running around being sensationalist about it, is to be methodical, to be calm, to give a message of reassurance that we are working hard to answer the questions and to allay fear, because I feel that the more we try and trumpet sensationalist claims, it feeds into the fear of not just patients but also our colleagues, and when that happens, all is lost. So let's hope that science, evidence, research is the guiding light that propels us forward in the next year or two.
Yeah, and that's obviously the basis of medicine that it was built on for hundreds of years. So, well, those are great words to end on. Anand, thanks so much, and we look forward to talking about this more with you in the future. And if you want to see more of this, you certainly can see that on theplasticsurgerychannel.com.